The locksmith's drill screamed against my front door at exactly 3:15 on a Saturday afternoon. I was holding a tray of bruschetta, welcoming guests to my first housewarming party, when my sister Vanessa walked up the porch steps with a man carrying a toolbox and a smile that could freeze champagne mid-pour. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya, we need to talk, she announced, not to me but to the dozen friends gathered in my living room. There's been a mistake. A significant one. Mom left this house to me, and I have the paperwork to prove it. The locksmith set down his equipment with a metallic clank that silenced the jazz playing from my speakers. Behind Vanessa stood our mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, and two cousins I hadn't seen since the funeral 6 months ago. They formed a wall of witnesses, armed with cardboard boxes and expressions of practiced sympathy. I know this is awkward timing, Vanessa continued, addressing my guests like they were a jury. But Maya has been living here under false pretenses. Mom's actual wishes were very clear. This property, along with the design studio, was meant to come to me. I'd been patient, tried to handle this privately, but my sister refused to listen to reason. Jonathan Pierce, my mother's attorney, stood near the kitchen holding a glass of pinot noir. I watched his face carefully. His expression revealed nothing, but his fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. Then, barely perceptible, he smiled. Not a social smile, but something else entirely. Something that suggested he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Vanessa, he said quietly, setting down his wine. Before you do anything irreversible, perhaps we should review the actual deed. My name is Maya Chen, and 6 months ago I lost my mother to a sudden heart attack at 58. Helen Chen had been an architect who specialized in sustainable residential design, a woman who could sketch a floor plan on a napkin that would make contractors weep with its elegance. She'd built the Maple Street house when I was 7, after my father died. Every corner held her fingerprints, every window framed a view she'd specifically chosen. For the past 29 years, this house had been my foundation. Now my sister, who hadn't visited in 3 years, wanted to take it away in front of everyone I cared about. The tension in my living room was suffocating. My friend Sarah had frozen halfway through refilling her plate. My coworker Marcus stood by the window, clearly trying to decide if he should leave. The locksmith, a weathered man in his 50s, looked increasingly uncomfortable as he realized he'd walked into a family war zone. Vanessa pulled out a manila folder, extracting papers with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. This is a deed transfer, properly notarized and witnessed, dated March 18th. Mom signed it at her attorney's office. Everything goes to me, the house, the studio, the investment accounts. All of it. She slid the papers across my dining table, the same table where Mom and I had eaten breakfast every Sunday morning, where we'd reviewed blueprints and debated the merits of passive solar design versus active systems. Where 3 weeks before she died, we'd celebrated my promotion at the graphic design firm with takeout Thai food and too much wine. March 18th, I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hammering of my heart. Mom was in San Francisco that entire week. She was giving a keynote at the Sustainable Architecture Conference. I have the program. Her face is on it. Vanessa's expression flickered, just for a second. She flew back for the afternoon. You wouldn't know because she specifically didn't tell you. She was tired of your dependence, Maya. Tired of enabling your refusal to build your own life. The words were designed to wound, and they did. My mother and I had been close, perhaps too close after Dad died. Vanessa had always resented it, the way Mom and I could communicate in shorthand, how we'd spend hours discussing design philosophy while she sat ignored, flipping through her phone. But there was something wrong with Vanessa's performance. She was too prepared, too rehearsed. The cousins behind her, Bethany and Drew, kept exchanging glances. Aunt Patricia wouldn't meet my eyes, her usual warmth replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. Jonathan Pierce moved closer to the table, pulling reading glasses from his jacket pocket. May I see the deed transfer? You're her attorney, Vanessa snapped. You know what Mom wanted. I was Helen's attorney, he corrected gently. Which is why I'm very curious about this document. I handled all of her estate planning, and I don't recall drafting any deed transfer in March. She used someone else. Obviously, she didn't trust you to be objective when it came to Maya. Jonathan picked up the papers, studying them with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 40 years reading legal documents. The room had gone completely silent. Even the locksmith had stopped unpacking his tools, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Interesting, Jonathan murmured. The notary listed here is Sandra Williams. Her commission number is clearly printed. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. According to the Oregon Notary Public Database, Sandra Williams' commission was suspended in February for improper notarization practices. It wasn't reinstated until May, 2 months after this document was allegedly signed. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. That's a technicality. A clerical error. There's also the matter of the witness signatures, Jonathan continued, his voice remaining professionally neutral. Roger Matthews and Linda Cho. I know both of them. They're paralegals at Morrison and Associates. The firm that Helen specifically refused to work with after they mishandled the Patterson project in 2018. He set the papers down with deliberate care. But most interesting is the property description itself. This deed references lot number 473 in the Maple Grove subdivision. Maya's house, the one we're standing in, is lot 437. Rather difficult to transfer a property when you reference the wrong lot number. The locksmith quietly began repacking his equipment. Several of my guests had pulled out their phones, no longer pretending not to be invested in the drama unfolding in my dining room. These are mistakes, Vanessa insisted, but her voice had lost its certainty. The document is still valid. Mom's signature is right there. Helen's signature, Jonathan agreed. Or something that looks like it. Which brings us to a more serious question. Where exactly did you obtain this deed transfer? Vanessa grabbed the papers back, clutching them against her chest. From Mom's safe deposit box at Northwest Federal. I had a key. She gave it to me years ago. That's fascinating, Jonathan said, because Helen closed her account at Northwest Federal in 2019. She moved everything to Pacific Trust after the merger. I have the closure documents in my office, along with a complete inventory of her safe deposit box contents, which I reviewed just last week as part of the estate settlement. I watched my sister's face cycle through calculations. Bethany had taken a step backward, physically distancing herself. Drew was staring at his shoes. Aunt Patricia looked like she wanted to sink through my hardwood floors. Perhaps, Jonathan continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase that I hadn't noticed him carrying, we should discuss what Helen actually intended. Because she was very specific about her wishes, and she took extraordinary measures to ensure they would be honored. He glanced at me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my breath catch. My mother had known. Somehow, she'd anticipated this exact scenario. The sister who'd always been jealous, always felt slighted, always believed she deserved more. Mom had left me something more valuable than the house. She'd left me protection, documentation, and apparently, an attorney who'd been waiting for Vanessa to make her move. The housewarming party had transformed into something else entirely. My guests weren't leaving. They were settling in, sensing that what had started as an awkward family confrontation was about to become something far more interesting. Jonathan Pierce opened his folder with the practiced calm of someone who held all the cards and was about to lay them on the table, one devastating revelation at a time. Shall we begin? He asked. The call came from Robert Hayes at 6:30 the next morning. I'd spent the night on my couch, unable to sleep in the bedroom that suddenly felt contested, surrounded by walls my mother had designed but that Vanessa claimed to own. My guests had eventually left around midnight, after Jonathan Pierce promised a formal meeting within 48 hours and Vanessa had stormed out with her entourage, threatening lawsuits and police involvement. Maya, it's time, Robert said without preamble. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd been carrying a secret too long. Meet me at Helen's studio in an hour. Bring nobody. Trust nobody except Jonathan. The drive to Chen Design Studio took me through streets still quiet with early Sunday morning calm. Portland was just waking up, coffee shops turning on their lights, joggers beginning their routes through the Pearl District. The studio occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows, exactly the kind of space my mother had loved for its honesty, its refusal to pretend it was something it wasn't. Robert was waiting inside, looking older than his 62 years, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He'd been Mom's business partner for 20 years, the structural engineer to her architectural vision. Together they'd built a firm known for innovative sustainable design, projects that won awards and changed how people thought about residential construction. She knew, he said, gesturing to the conference table where manila folders sat in neat rows. Helen knew everything, Maya. About Vanessa's resentment, about the attempts to access her accounts, about the forged documents that were being prepared. My stomach dropped. How long? 2 years. Maybe longer. Robert opened the first folder, revealing photographs I'd never seen. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Vanessa entering a print shop at odd hours. Meeting with a man Robert identified as Craig Morrison, a disbarred attorney who'd been caught fabricating estate documents in 2022. Financial transfers that showed Vanessa had been systematically draining money from Aunt Patricia's accounts, small amounts over years, building a pattern. Your mother hired Rita Morales, Robert continued. Former fraud investigator, 20 years with the Portland Police Bureau before she went private. Helen paid her for 18 months of surveillance and documentation. Everything you're about to see, everything Jonathan will present, it's all legally obtained and verified. He handed me a letter, my mother's handwriting still confident despite the tremor that had begun affecting her hands in those final months. The date at the top made my throat constrict. She'd written it 3 weeks before her death. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then Vanessa has made her move and I am gone. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Sorry I couldn't stop her while I was alive, sorry I had to play weak when I wanted to fight. But fighting her directly would have meant years of legal battles, public accusations, and damage to you that I couldn't allow. She's been planning this for longer than you know. The first attempt was 4 years ago, trying to convince me you were stealing from the studio accounts. When that didn't work, she tried to have me declared incompetent, meeting with doctors who specialized in elder care, preparing a case. She underestimated how thoroughly I document everything, how many friends I have in the medical and legal communities who warned me what she was attempting. So I became what she expected, a sick woman losing her grip, someone who might be confused about her own wishes. I let her think she was winning while Rita gathered evidence and Jonathan built your protection brick by brick. The house on Maple Street is yours. Every window I placed was thinking of the light you love. Every room was designed around the life I hoped you'd build. The studio is yours too, though I know you may not want to run it. That's fine. Sell it, transform it, whatever brings you peace. But know that I built it thinking someday you might step into this work, bringing your graphic design vision to architectural spaces the way I always believed you could. I've left instructions for Robert and Jonathan. There's a trust, carefully structured, that Vanessa cannot touch without destroying herself. There's documentation of every crime she's committed, and Maya, there are many. Financial fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and worse things I won't detail here because you'll see the evidence soon enough. She'll come for you at the moment she thinks you're most vulnerable. That's her pattern. She waited until Dad died to start undermining you with me, planting doubts, creating distance. She'll wait until I'm gone to try taking everything. But I've made sure she can't win. Be strong, sweetheart. You're more like me than you know, not just in how you see design and space, but in how you fight. You observe, you plan, you wait for the right moment. The right moment is coming. All my love, always. The studio belongs to you. Don't let her take it. Don't let her rewrite our story. I read it twice more before looking up at Robert. His eyes were wet, matching my own. There's more, he said quietly. Helen didn't just prepare legal documents. She prepared a complete case file, the kind that prosecutors dream about. Every forged signature, every fraudulent document Vanessa commissioned, every conversation she had planning to take control of Helen's assets. He opened another folder, this one thicker. Inside were audio transcripts, surveillance photos, financial records spanning 5 years. Vanessa meeting with Craig Morrison, discussing how to fabricate a deed transfer. Vanessa accessing Mom's computer when she thought no one was watching, downloading files, searching for account information. Vanessa on the phone with someone named Marcus Webb, a private investigator who'd been caught planting false evidence in custody disputes. Your sister hired him to create documentation of your supposed financial irresponsibility, Robert explained. False credit reports, fabricated debt collection notices, anything that could make Helen doubt your stability. Marcus kept copies of everything because criminals always do, insurance against their clients. When he was arrested last year in an unrelated case, he sold out everyone he'd worked with, including Vanessa. The evidence kept cascading. Bank records showing Vanessa had embezzled nearly $200,000 from the studio over 3 years, disguised as contractor payments to companies that didn't exist. Email chains where she discussed drugging Mom's coffee to increase confusion during important meetings. Recorded conversations about accelerating Helen's decline, ensuring she died before she could change any documents back in my favor. She talked about killing her, I whispered, staring at a transcript where Vanessa discussed medication interactions with someone who appeared to be a corrupt pharmacy technician. She researched it extensively, Robert confirmed. Heart medication interactions, how to trigger cardiac events in someone with Mom's condition. Rita has it all documented. Helen's doctor was alerted, started monitoring everything carefully. That's why, when Helen did have her heart attack, the autopsy was extremely thorough. There was no foul play, Maya. Vanessa didn't get the chance to act on any of those plans. But the intent was there, captured in dozens of communications. I felt sick, physically ill at the scope of my sister's hatred. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or resentment over favoritism. This was systematic, calculated destruction planned over years. Why didn't Mom go to the police? She wanted to, Robert said. But Jonathan advised against it. Proving intent is difficult, and a failed prosecution would have alerted Vanessa, made her more careful. Helen decided instead to build an airtight civil case, to create a trap so perfect that Vanessa would walk into it willingly and destroy herself without ever getting the chance to harm you. He pulled out a final document, this one bound in blue legal backing. The Chen Family Trust, established 14 months ago. Everything flows into it upon Helen's death. You're the primary beneficiary of 90%. Vanessa gets 10%, approximately $200,000, conditional on her accepting it without challenge. And if she challenges? She forfeits everything, and every piece of evidence Rita collected goes to the district attorney, the State Bar Association, and the media. Jonathan calls it the Transparency Protocol. Vanessa can take her 10% and disappear, or she can fight and face criminal prosecution for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The room felt too small suddenly, the weight of my mother's protection crushing and beautiful at once. She'd spent her final years not just designing buildings but designing my safety, architecting a future where Vanessa couldn't touch me. There's something else, Robert said, his voice dropping. Helen recorded videos, messages for you to watch after everything was settled. But she recorded one specifically for if Vanessa contested anything. She called it her ethical statement, explaining to the world exactly who Vanessa was and what she'd attempted. He pulled up a video file on his laptop. My mother's face appeared, thinner than I remembered, her eyes tired but fierce. The timestamp showed it was recorded 6 weeks before her death. Should we watch it now? I asked. No, Robert said gently. That's for after Vanessa makes her choice. But know that it exists, that Helen left nothing to chance. She documented everything, explained everything, and created consequences so severe that your sister has only one rational choice. I thought about yesterday's confrontation, Vanessa's confidence crumbling as Jonathan exposed the flaws in her forged deed. She'd left my house defeated but not destroyed, probably already consulting attorneys, trying to find a way to fight. She would lose. My mother had made certain of it. When do we meet with Jonathan? I asked. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. at his office. Vanessa has been summoned, along with her attorney, if she's smart enough to bring one. We're going to lay out everything, give her the choice Helen designed, and watch her decide between limited loss and total destruction. Robert closed the folders, his movements careful, almost reverent. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world, Maya. Every plan she made, every piece of evidence she collected, it was all to protect you from Vanessa's greed. She couldn't fight while she was alive without putting you at risk, so she built you a fortress to inherit. I walked to the windows, looking out at the Portland skyline my mother had helped shape. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was plotting her next move, believing she still had options, still had leverage. She didn't know that Mom had already won, that every move had been anticipated, every counter-strategy prepared. The house was mine. The studio was mine. And tomorrow, Vanessa would learn exactly what it cost to underestimate Helen Chen's love for her daughter. Rita Morales had the kind of presence that made people confess without being asked. 23 years investigating financial crimes for Portland PD had given her an instinct for deception, an ability to read body language that bordered on supernatural. She sat across from me in Jonathan Pierce's conference room, spreading evidence across the mahogany table like a card dealer revealing a royal flush. Your mother contacted me in April of 2023, Rita began, her voice carrying traces of her Bronx childhood despite decades in Oregon. She'd noticed irregularities in the studio accounts. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $1,000 there, always coded as legitimate contractor expenses. But Helen was meticulous about her books. She knew every vendor, every invoice, every transaction. Rita pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop, color-coded cells highlighting the discrepancies. Vanessa had created shell companies. Pacific Northwest Consulting, Cascade Design Services, Riverfront Materials. They all traced back to a single business address in Beaverton, a mail forwarding service. The invoices looked legitimate, professionally designed, complete with tax identification numbers. But none of these companies existed beyond paperwork. I stared at the numbers climbing steadily over 3 years. What had started as petty theft had escalated into systematic embezzlement. By the time Mom caught on, Vanessa had stolen nearly $230,000 from the studio she'd helped build. How did she think she'd get away with it? I asked. She believed Helen was too trusting, too focused on design work to scrutinize finances closely. What Vanessa didn't know was that your mother had audit protocols built into every project, legacy systems from the early days when one bad contract could have bankrupted the firm. The moment those shell company payments triggered a threshold alert, Helen knew exactly what to look for. Rita clicked to another file, this one containing photographs. Vanessa entering a FedEx store, carrying boxes of printed invoices. Vanessa meeting with Craig Morrison at a dim sum restaurant in southeast Portland, documents spread between them on the table. Vanessa accessing Mom's home office computer late at night, illuminated by screen glow, unaware that security cameras captured everything. Your mother upgraded her home security system 18 months ago, Rita explained. Told Vanessa it was because of neighborhood break-ins. Actually, it was to document every unauthorized access to her files. We have 247 hours of footage showing Vanessa searching through financial records, copying documents, attempting to access password-protected accounts. The evidence was overwhelming in its mundane detail. No dramatic confrontations, no smoking guns, just systematic documentation of someone stealing from family, erasing their tracks, building a case to claim inheritance they had no right to possess. The forged deed transfer took her 6 months to arrange, Rita continued. Craig Morrison charged her $15,000, payment made in cash installments that we traced through ATM withdrawals and spending patterns. Morrison used outdated notary information, thinking it wouldn't be checked carefully during probate. He also made the lot number error, probably working from memory rather than pulling actual property records. She produced another document, this one a transcript of a recorded conversation. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings. Your mother wore a wire to Thanksgiving dinner last year. Listen to this section. Rita pressed play. The audio quality was remarkably clear, voices distinct even with background noise from what I recognized as Mom's dining room. Vanessa's voice came through, slightly wine-slurred but unmistakable. The problem is Maya. She's always been the favorite, always gotten everything handed to her. The house should be mine, Mom. I'm the older daughter. I helped you through Dad's death while she was off at art school pretending to find herself. Mom's response was measured, carefully neutral. Both of you will be provided for, Vanessa. I've made arrangements that are fair. Fair would be recognizing who actually stayed, who actually contributed. Maya flutters in and out, takes your attention when it suits her, and you act like she's some kind of prodigy. She's a graphic designer, Mom. She makes logos for startup companies. I sell multi-million-dollar properties. I have actual accomplishments. Aunt Patricia's voice entered, uncomfortable and placating. Vanessa, this isn't the time. When is the time? When she's dead and Maya inherits everything because she manipulated her way into the favorite daughter position? I've been building my case, by the way. Evidence of her financial instability, her inability to maintain relationships, her dependence on Mom for housing and emotional support well into her 30s. Any court would see it. The recording ended. Rita's expression remained professionally neutral, but I could see the disgust beneath it. Your mother recorded 8 separate conversations where Vanessa discussed strategies for contesting the will, claiming you were unfit to inherit, or arguing for incompetency proceedings. The Thanksgiving tape is actually the mildest. In January, she discussed medication interactions that could trigger cardiac events in someone with your mother's condition. My hands had gone cold. She researched how to kill her. Extensively. We have her search history from her laptop, pulled from cloud backups after she foolishly synced her personal computer to the studio network. Queries about heart medication side effects, drug interactions with Helen's prescriptions, how to make death appear natural. She visited forums where people discussed theoretical poisoning scenarios. She contacted a pharmacy technician who'd been fired for theft, asking questions about accessing patient medication records. Rita pulled up chat logs, messages that made my stomach turn. Vanessa asking how quickly cardiac arrest occurred with specific drug combinations. Vanessa researching inheritance timelines, probate procedures, how quickly estates could be settled. Vanessa calculating her expected inheritance and how it would change if Mom died before updating any documents. Did she ever actually attempt anything? The question came out hoarse. We don't believe so. Helen's cardiologist was alerted to the research and began monitoring everything carefully. All medications were triple-checked. Helen never ate or drank anything at family gatherings that Vanessa could have accessed. The heart attack that killed her was thoroughly investigated. Natural causes, no suspicious substances, timing consistent with her underlying condition. Vanessa researched murder but didn't execute it, likely because Helen became too cautious, too protected. Rita's laptop showed a timeline, color-coded by crime category. Financial fraud in blue, forgery in red, conspiracy in green, and attempted murder in black. The black dots clustered heavily in the 6 months before Mom's death, an escalating pattern of someone growing desperate. The shell companies were actually Vanessa's downfall, Rita said. If she'd just stolen cash, it would have been harder to trace. But creating fake businesses meant incorporation paperwork, tax forms, bank accounts. Every fake company left a trail leading directly back to her. We have her signature on incorporation documents, her handwriting on deposit slips, her fingerprints on invoices. She opened another folder, this one containing witness statements. The FedEx employee who remembered Vanessa ordering custom invoices. The landlord of the mail forwarding service who identified her from photographs. Craig Morrison's confession, given in exchange for reduced charges in an unrelated fraud case, detailing exactly how he'd created the forged deed transfer and what Vanessa had paid him. Morrison kept meticulous records, Rita said with grim satisfaction. He recorded their conversations, saved all communications, documented every payment. When prosecutors offered him a deal, he provided everything. The deed transfer Vanessa presented at your housewarming party has been definitively proven as fraudulent. The notary signature is forged, the witness signatures are fake, and Morrison has sworn testimony that Vanessa commissioned it specifically to claim your house. I thought about my sister's confidence yesterday, walking into my home with a locksmith, ready to change the locks in front of witnesses. She believed her forgery was flawless, that Mom's death had removed the only obstacle to her inheritance. What about Aunt Patricia and the cousins? I asked. They backed her up, came as witnesses. Rita's expression darkened. Patricia received payments from Vanessa over 5 years, totaling $48,000. We believe it was hush money, compensation for supporting Vanessa's narrative about your supposed irresponsibility. The cousins, Bethany and Drew, were paid smaller amounts. Essentially, Vanessa bought a family consensus that you were unfit to inherit. More spreadsheets, more bank transfers, more evidence of corruption that ran deeper than simple sibling rivalry. Vanessa had systematically purchased allies, isolated me from extended family, created a false narrative that I was unstable, dependent, undeserving. Your mother documented all of it, Rita said. Every payment, every lie, every manipulation. She played along, pretending not to notice, while I gathered evidence that would stand up in criminal court. Helen wanted more than just protecting you. She wanted Vanessa to face consequences for years of betrayal. Rita closed her laptop, the gesture final. Tomorrow morning, Jonathan will present Vanessa with a choice. Accept 10% of the trust, approximately $200,000, and sign agreements never to contact you again, never to challenge the estate, never to return to Oregon. Or challenge it and have all of this evidence turned over to the district attorney. What charges would she face? Elder financial abuse, forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering. Oregon takes elder abuse seriously. She'd be looking at 15 to 20 years in prison if convicted, and with this evidence, conviction would be virtually guaranteed. The DA's office has already reviewed preliminary materials and expressed strong interest in prosecution. The scope of my mother's protection was staggering. She'd transformed her own suffering into a comprehensive legal trap, every humiliation documented, every crime catalogued. Vanessa had believed she was manipulating a sick, distracted woman. Instead, she'd been performing for an audience that included investigators, attorneys, and eventually prosecutors. There's one more element, Rita said. Helen established a monitoring provision in the trust. If Vanessa accepts the settlement, I'm retained for 10 years to ensure she maintains no contact with you. Any attempt to reach out, any social media interaction, any indirect communication through third parties triggers immediate evidence release and criminal prosecution. Your mother called it the containment protocol. 10 years of professional surveillance, ensuring my sister could never return, never threaten, never manipulate. Mom had thought of everything, designed a system so complete that Vanessa's only rational choice was exile with limited compensation. She really loved you, Rita said quietly. In 23 years investigating family crimes, I've never seen a victim plan protection this thoroughly. Helen turned her final months into a masterclass in evidence collection and legal strategy. She couldn't fight Vanessa while alive without putting you at risk, so she built you an unbreakable shield to inherit. Tomorrow morning, Vanessa would walk into Jonathan's office expecting negotiation. Instead, she'd face the complete architecture of her own destruction, every crime exposed, every lie documented, every escape route sealed. Mom's final design, built not with sustainable materials and passive solar, but with evidence, testimony, and the inexorable weight of truth. The conference room at Pierce & Associates occupied the 20th floor of the U.S. Bancorp Tower, offering views of the Willamette River that my mother had always admired. Jonathan had chosen this space deliberately, I realized, somewhere neutral but elevated, where the symbolism of height reinforced the gravity of what was about to unfold. Vanessa arrived at 9:03, flanked by a lawyer I didn't recognize. He was young, probably fresh out of law school, carrying a briefcase that looked expensive but unused. His name, according to the introductions Jonathan performed with icy courtesy, was Tyler Brennan. He specialized in estate disputes, which meant Vanessa had at least been smart enough to hire representation, even if she'd chosen someone inexperienced enough to take a case this doomed. Aunt Patricia and the cousins were notably absent. Whatever leverage Vanessa had used to secure their loyalty at my housewarming had apparently evaporated once they understood the stakes. "Thank you for coming," Jonathan began, his voice carrying none of the warmth he'd shown me in previous meetings. "Before we proceed, I need to establish some ground rules. This meeting is being recorded, with everyone's knowledge and consent. Oregon law permits this. If anyone objects, we can conclude now and communicate through written correspondence." Tyler glanced at Vanessa, who shook her head curtly. She dressed in a navy suit, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. The costume of someone expecting a professional negotiation, prepared to discuss terms and reach compromise. She had no idea what was coming. "Good," Jonathan continued. "Then let's address the deed transfer you presented at Maya's residence on Saturday. I've had it examined by 3 separate forensic document analysts. Their findings are unanimous and damning." He slid a bound report across the table. Tyler reached for it, but Vanessa grabbed it first, scanning the executive summary. I watched color drain from her face. "The notary commission was invalid at the time of alleged signing," Jonathan enumerated, his tone suggesting he was reading a grocery list rather than dismantling someone's life. "The witness signatures have been conclusively identified as forgeries, comparing unfavorably to known exemplars of the individual's actual handwriting. The lot number is incorrect, referencing property your mother didn't own. Most significantly, the paper stock wasn't manufactured until after Helen's death, which makes the alleged March signing date physically impossible." Tyler had gone pale. He'd probably expected irregularities, minor issues to negotiate around. Instead, he was staring at proof his client had commissioned obvious fraud. "Craig Morrison has provided sworn testimony about creating this document for your client," Jonathan continued, opening another folder. "He's given prosecutors detailed accounts of 5 meetings where he and Vanessa discussed fabricating estate documents. He kept recordings of 3 conversations. Would you like to hear them, or shall I simply provide the transcripts?" "This is entrapment," Vanessa said, her voice tight. "Morrison is a convicted criminal. His testimony is worthless. His testimony is corroborated by financial records showing cash payments matching his claimed compensation, by surveillance footage of your meetings, and by the physical evidence of the forged deed itself. Prosecutors find him quite credible, actually, especially since he has nothing to gain and significant prison time to lose by lying." Jonathan produced a tablet, queuing up video. "This is from the parking lot of the Jade Garden restaurant, Southeast Powell Boulevard, October 14th of last year. That's you arriving at 11:42. That's Morrison arriving 6 minutes later. You spent 97 minutes together. Security footage from inside the restaurant shows documents on your table. We've enhanced the images. Care to explain what you're reviewing?" The video was damning in its clarity. Vanessa leaning over papers, Morrison pointing at sections, both of them focused on what appeared to be property records. Tyler finally found his voice. "My client is willing to negotiate. Clearly there have been misunderstandings about Helen's intentions. Perhaps we can discuss a reasonable distribution that honors both daughters' relationships with their mother." "There's nothing to negotiate," Jonathan replied. Helen's intentions were crystal clear. She established the Chen family trust, properly executed and filed. Everything flows into it. Maya receives 90% as primary beneficiary. Vanessa receives 10%, approximately $200,000, conditional upon accepting it without challenge. He paused, letting the amount sink in. $200,000 was generous by any standard, more than most people inherited, certainly more than Vanessa deserved given what she'd attempted. However, Jonathan continued, that offer comes with non-negotiable conditions. Vanessa must sign a comprehensive settlement agreement. She must acknowledge the trust distributions are final and binding. She must agree to have no contact with Maya for 10 years. She must relocate outside Oregon within 90 days. She must provide a written statement acknowledging her fraudulent deed transfer and agreeing not to contest any aspect of Helen's estate. You're asking her to confess to crimes, Tyler protested. I'm offering her a choice. Accept these terms, receive $200,000, and move on with her life. Or challenge the trust, and face criminal prosecution for elder financial abuse, forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and witness tampering. Jonathan opened his laptop, turning it so both Vanessa and Tyler could see the screen. This is a summary of evidence compiled by Rita Morales over 18 months. Shell companies created to embezzle from Chen Design Studio, totaling $234,000. Forged invoices, fabricated contractor expenses, systematic theft from the business Helen built. He clicked to another file. Recorded conversations where Vanessa discusses strategies for having Helen declared incompetent. Emails with Marcus Webb, a private investigator later convicted of evidence fabrication, commissioning false documentation of Maya's supposed financial irresponsibility. Bank transfers showing payments to family members in exchange for supporting Vanessa's narrative that Maya was unfit to inherit. Vanessa had gone rigid, hands clenched on the table. Tyler was scrolling through documents on the tablet, his expression shifting from defensive to horrified. There's more, Jonathan said quietly. Helen documented every unauthorized access to her computer, every searched file, every copied document. 247 hours of security footage showing Vanessa systematically attempting to access financial accounts, estate planning documents, and medical records. He paused, his voice dropping to something almost sad. And then there's the research into cardiac drug interactions, the queries about making death appear natural, the contact with a corrupt pharmacy technician about accessing patient medication records. Helen's cardiologist was alerted. Nothing was left to chance. Your client researched how to murder her mother, Mr. Brennan. She didn't succeed, but the intent is documented exhaustively. The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Vanessa stared at the table, jaw working, realizing the scope of her exposure. The district attorney has reviewed preliminary evidence, Jonathan continued. They're prepared to file charges if the estate is contested in any way. Elder abuse cases are prosecuted aggressively in Oregon, and your client's research into hastening her mother's death makes this particularly egregious. We're looking at 15 to 20 years in prison if convicted, and with this evidence, conviction is virtually certain. He closed the laptop with deliberate care. Helen didn't want this outcome. She wanted Vanessa to have something, to walk away with dignity and resources to build a different life. But she also wanted protection from Maya, ironclad protection that would last long after Helen herself was gone. Jonathan produced another document, this one embossed with legal seals. The trust includes what Helen called a transparency protocol. If challenged, all evidence becomes public record. Copies go to the district attorney, the State Bar Association, and media outlets. Your client's crimes become front-page news. Her real estate career ends. Her reputation is destroyed permanently. Tyler had started taking notes, probably calculating just how catastrophically he'd misjudged this case when Vanessa hired him. Alternatively, Jonathan said, his tone suggesting mercy that hadn't been earned, Vanessa signs the settlement agreement today. She provides written acknowledgement of the fraudulent deed. She accepts $200,000 distributed over 4 years to ensure compliance. She relocates outside Oregon and maintains zero contact with Maya. In exchange, all evidence remains sealed permanently. No criminal charges. No public exposure. She walks away with her freedom and enough money to start over somewhere else. He slid the settlement agreement across the table. You have until 5 p.m. today to decide. After that, the offer expires, and we proceed directly to criminal referral. Helen built 2 roads forward, Mr. Brennan. One leads to limited loss and a fresh start. The other leads to prosecution, prison, and permanent ruin. Advise your client wisely. Vanessa finally looked up, meeting my eyes across the table. For the first time since childhood, I saw her without defenses, stripped of the confidence and contempt that had always armored her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her own schemes collapsing. She planned this, Vanessa said hoarsely. Mom planned all of this, knowing I'd come for the house. Helen loved both her daughters, Jonathan replied. But she also understood human nature. She gave you every opportunity to choose differently, Vanessa. The money you embezzled could have been returned. The forgery could have been abandoned. The research into harming her could have remained theoretical. At every point, you chose escalation over conscience. He gestured to the settlement agreement. This is your last opportunity to choose wisely. Helen's final gift to you, honestly, more grace than you've shown anyone in years. Take it or face everything Rita documented. Those are your only options. Tyler pulled Vanessa aside, their whispered conversation urgent and one-sided. I could see him explaining just how thoroughly she was beaten, how no competent attorney would advise challenging this trust, how prosecution was certain if she fought. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert, studio accounts frozen pending resolution. Board voted unanimously to support trust provisions. Vanessa has no allies left. Mom had thought of everything, sealed every exit, anticipated every desperate move. The sister who'd spent years undermining me was learning what it meant to face someone who planned battles in decades rather than days. Tyler returned to the table, his professional composure barely maintained. We need time to review the settlement terms thoroughly. This is complex. It's remarkably simple, Jonathan corrected. Sign and receive limited inheritance with conditions, or refuse and face prosecution. You have until 5 p.m. I suggest you read quickly. The call came at 4:37. Tyler Brennan's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd spent 6 hours explaining reality to a client who refused to hear it. We'll sign, he said simply. Ms. Chen accepts the settlement terms as written. Jonathan glanced at me across his desk, where I'd been waiting since lunch, unable to focus on anything except watching the clock. Understood. We'll have everything ready for execution at your office by 6 p.m. Ms. Chen will need to be present for notarization. After he hung up, Jonathan allowed himself the smallest smile. Your mother knew she'd fight until the last possible moment. She always did. The signing took place in a smaller conference room at Brennan's practice, a modest space in northwest Portland that smelled of old coffee and defeated ambitions. Vanessa looked hollowed out, makeup unable to conceal the sleepless night she'd obviously endured. She signed each page mechanically, Tyler guiding her hand to the proper lines like she'd forgotten how to read. The settlement was comprehensive in its restrictions. $200,000 distributed quarterly over 4 years, each payment conditional on maintaining zero contact with me. Relocation outside Oregon within 90 days, verified by quarterly address confirmations. A written statement acknowledging the deed transfer was fraudulent and that she'd commissioned its creation. Agreement to forfeit all payments and face criminal prosecution if any term was violated. Rita Morales would monitor compliance for 10 years. Any social media interaction, any indirect communication through third parties, any attempt to return to Portland would trigger immediate evidence release. Mom had built a cage of consequences so complete that Vanessa's only freedom lay in accepting permanent exile. When the notary finished, Vanessa stood abruptly. She looked at me once, something unreadable in her expression. Not quite apology, not quite hatred. Maybe just recognition that she'd lost to someone who'd loved me more than Vanessa had loved anything. She left without speaking, Tyler trailing behind with boxes of documents they'd been required to sign. The door closed with a soft click that somehow felt final. It's done, Jonathan said. The house is legally confirmed as yours. The studio transfers to your control tomorrow. All of Helen's protections are now active and enforceable. I nodded, throat too tight for words. Robert Hayes, who'd witnessed the signing from the corner, placed a hand on my shoulder. Helen left one more thing, he said quietly. For after Vanessa made her choice. Back at the Maple Street house that evening, Robert handed me a small wooden box, the kind Mom used for storing architectural sketches. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. My dearest Maya, if you're holding this, then Vanessa chose exile over destruction. Part of me hoped she'd choose differently, that she'd find some courage or conscience I'd failed to see. But I knew her nature too well. She always chose money over meaning, safety over accountability. The thumb drive contains videos I recorded during my final months. Not evidence or testimony, just conversations. Me talking to you about design philosophy, about the projects we dreamed of collaborating on, about the daughter you've become and the architect I always believed you could be. I couldn't leave you voice without leaving you these words. Watch them when you're ready, when grief has softened enough to let joy back in. The house is yours now, sweetheart. Make it yours in ways I never could, not as a museum to my memory but as a foundation for your future. The studio can become whatever serves you best. Sell it, transform it, step into it. I built it hoping you'd join me someday, but I'll be proud of whatever choice brings you peace. Vanessa is gone now, exiled by her own greed and my planning. You're safe from her manipulation, free to build relationships without her interference. That freedom was worth every uncomfortable moment I endured documenting her crimes. I love you beyond measure, beyond words, beyond death itself. Every window in this house frames light I chose thinking of your smile. Every room holds space I designed imagining your laughter filling it. Live here. Love here. Create beauty the way only you can. Mom. I sat on the porch steps as sunset painted the sky in shades Mom had specifically oriented the house to capture. Tomorrow I'd return to work at the design firm, probably give notice, maybe start planning how to transform the studio into something that honored her legacy while building my own. Tonight though, I just sat in the house she'd built, protected by the fortress of evidence and law she'd constructed, surrounded by walls that had always been meant for me. My phone buzzed with messages. Sarah asking if I was okay. Marcus offering to bring dinner. Robert confirming studio transition paperwork was ready for my signature. A text from Jonathan with a single line, Helen would be proud. I looked up at the second-floor window where Mom's office had been, half expecting to see her silhouette, hand raised in the wave she'd always given when I came home. The window was dark, empty, just glass and frame and the ghost of someone who'd loved me enough to turn her dying months into my protection. Vanessa was gone, banned from the city where we'd grown up, exiled from the family she'd tried to steal from. She had money but had lost everything that mattered, reputation, home, connection, the sister she'd spent years trying to erase. I had the house, the studio, and the truth. Most importantly, I had proof that Mom had never stopped fighting for me, never stopped planning my future, never stopped being the architect of my safety even when it looked like distance and silence. She'd built me one final structure, not with sustainable materials and passive solar, but with evidence and law and love so fierce it survived death itself. The Maple Street house stood solid around me, every corner designed with purpose, every window placed with intention, every room a testament to a mother's protection. I raised my water glass to the empty porch beside me, to the space where Mom used to sit sketching evening light patterns. We won, I whispered to the architecture she'd left behind. Somewhere in the settling house, I could almost hear her answer. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.